Hi, today we're going to learn about tide pools. This book is called Let's Take a Field Trip to a Tide Pool by Kathy Fergang. What is a tide pool? Does anybody know? Let's read and find out. If you walk along the seashore at different times of the day, you will see that the level of the ocean water changes. The water level is highest at high tide. The water level sinks down during low tide. When tides are low, you can explore the world of tide pools. Tide pools are areas of low or shallow water surrounded by rock. They are found at rocky seashores like those in Maine or Oregon. Tide pools act almost like soup bowls in the ground. They collect water left behind from the high tide, and they are homes for many beautiful, interesting sea creatures. We're going to find out what kind of sea creatures. Who lives in a tide pool? Most of the sea creatures that live in tide pools are invertebrates. Invertebrates have no backbone. A backbone is a row of bones that supports an animal's skeleton. Crashing waves that might hurt other animals are not as hard as invertebrates. They are softer and can move easily in water. Starfish, sea anemones, and jellyfish are all invertebrates that live in tide pools. Other invertebrate animals have shells on the outside of their bodies, such as crabs, mussels, and clams. Simple plants such as moss and seaweed also live in ocean tide pools. And here we have a picture of a starfish. So what makes a starfish special? Any guesses? They have bodies that can fix themselves. When a starfish loses an arm, a new one will naturally grow back in its place. How about that? Kind of a hard place to survive. Tide pools are not easy neighborhoods for animals to live in. Imagine being a tiny sea creature. Twice a day, waves hit you and cover you for hours. Then the water goes away. Only a small pool is left, and you almost dry up in the hot sun. That's what it's like for tide pool animals. Animals such as crabs and starfish can be found in other areas of the ocean, but for those that live in a tide pool, it is often the only life they know. They were born in a tide pool and spend their whole lives in a tide pool. And the caption says, waves and tides change the tide pool neighborhood twice a day. Animals learn how to live in both wet and dry conditions. They even hide during low tide to get away from the hot sun. How animals in a tide pool eat. Each animal in a tide pool eats in a different way. Crabs have claws that they use to grab food. Sea anemones have feelers that sting and poison a fish so that the fish stop moving. Starfish, mussels, and clams eat seaweed and other tiny sea creatures. The animals in a tide pool don't run out of food to eat because the ocean waters carry food from tide pool to tide pool. I have some pictures here. The Acadian hermit crab. When high tide comes, it's mealtime. Animals must find as much food as possible before the tide goes out again. And then we have a green sea anemone, a true tulip snail, and a beadlet anemone, and a horned starfish. The low zone. The area of the tide pool that gets the most water is the low zone. The low zone is closest to the deep ocean, so when the tide comes in, it covers the low zone with water first. When the tide goes out, this area is last to be left uncovered. A few animals that live here are sea slugs, sea spiders, and small sea urchins. Waves are hard on most small animals, but the sea urchin has a special trick to stay alive. It carves a hole in the rock with its hard shell. The sea urchin then goes inside the rock to stay safe from the crashing waves. The mid-tide zone. The mid-tide zone is found in the middle of the tide pool area. This is the most active zone of all because many animals live here. Even more animals come here looking for food as the tides move in and out. Starfish, sea anemones, and mussels are just a few of the animals that live in the mid-tide zone. Like most shelled sea animals, mussels eat by sucking ocean water in and out of their bodies. When the water leaves their bodies, tiny one-celled animals from the water stay behind. These one-celled animals are food for the mussels. All tide pool animals use the ocean to meet their needs. Have you ever seen empty shells at the seashore? They are empty because the animal that once lived in it has died or left it to find a bigger shell as a new home. The high zone. The high zone is farthest from the deep ocean. It has the biggest change from high tide to low tide. Only the toughest creatures can survive here. When the tide comes in, animals in the high zone can find the food they need. When the tide is out, they have trouble staying alive. There is no food, little water, and the sun is very hot. Crabs and snails live here. They eat seaweed and tiny creatures. Their shells protect them from being eaten. Their shells also protect them from burning in the hot sun during low tide. Tide pools are one of the most interesting places to watch sea life. You can get up close and watch communities of fish, plants, and animals.